Hey everyone. I just thought I was going live, but it turns out I wasn't. Hopefully, I'm live now and I'm connected. So I've upgraded my setup a little bit. If you're familiar with this stream, my mic should be picking me up in the room now, so I don't have to sit there. If I'm too quiet or too loud, let me know and I'll adjust that. I've got some scenes set up as well, which should help when showing information and stuff. So yeah, I never really set up as a streamer, but I'm finally getting there. Today I wanted to talk about some stuff that I learned years ago. Um, I got hold of all this stuff. Ooh, I need to mute this. Pardon me. I need to mute my own stream. There we go. Um, yeah, I learned a bunch of stuff about the real basics of public key cryptography and how we can protect ourselves digitally. Um, and it's been good to know that stuff. It's been the real basics of understanding of the real mechanics of the internet and how we work. I've been trying to come up with a layman's explanation of what the internet is and how it works for some of the Start 9 promotion I'm doing. And it's not easy to explain what the internet is and how we use it and how we operate in relation to the internet. Not easy, but a basic understanding of cryptography is pretty essential. And then understanding the client server model as well. The fact that none of what we own and can expect to be ours is really ours anymore. Your record collection isn't in your house, it's in someone else's drive, and it's content that you can access sometimes, or maybe not other times. It's all dependent on someone else. So none of what you own, everything's been dematerialized now. Your record collection, your newspapers, your basic data, or your photos, everything isn't yours anymore. It belongs to someone else, and they allow you to access it on an account-based model, but they might not. And that's what you got to remember, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make everyone move away from, well, we can keep the client server model, that's the point, but you have to have your own server. You have to host your own services. You have to self-host. And that's how you get digital self-sovereignty. And I'm hoping I can explain this to some people. I don't know if I've got any comments yet. I may do, so let me just... I might not be seeing your live chat, guys. I've got some issues here. My end, it looks like. No, I don't think there's anything going on yet. So, if you're just joining, thanks for joining. I'm kind of treading water for a little bit at the beginning of the stream, so feel free to fast forward until there's some people enter, and I've got some engagement here. For the meantime, I'm just sort of checking out my setup because it's a bit new. And yeah, so I think I'll just take a look at what I've been tweeting about lately at the beginning, just to tell you what's at the front of my mind. We have mandatory vaccinations for healthcare workers now in a lot of places. That's kind of been the case for years anyway, but it was never okay. And now, given that these vaccines are a little bit more risky than your average vaccine, a lot of doctors are going to be having a problem with that, but they're all about to lose their job if they do. And doctors, that's quite a thing. Like, already I know about taxi drivers, and anyone on minimum wage jobs has had to be vaccinated for a while now. But doctors, they're a bit more of a respected group. They're more highly regarded in our society than people stacking shelves in supermarkets. So it's going to be interesting to see how much they put up with, because I'm sure there's plenty of doctors out there that would rather not be vaccinated until there's a little bit more data available. So that's on my mind, of course. I do genuinely feel like we're entering a war, and that's why people need to learn how to do the digital equivalent of use a firearm, because it's going to become very helpful. I'm still, guys, if anyone's here, please let me know if you can hear. Okay, what's going on. I don't know if my microphone is audible entirely yet. I'm hoping it is. I don't see any... oh, hey Prem. Hoi hoi, internet and Bitcoin mechanic. Hey Prem, thanks for joining, man. It's good to see you again. Sadly my... there it is. No, it just showed up. Great. Sound is fine. Thank you, Prem. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've finally got my chat back. It's working effectively again. So yeah, I mean, I'll start off by saying, thanks Joyce. I'll start off by saying that years ago, I watched a video by a great developer called Jacob Appelbaum, who was employed by Tor, Tor, that's the onion router. Now, Tor is extremely helpful technology for maintaining anonymity online, and Tor stands for the onion router. And onion routing is it's a protocol whereby you go through 3 hops with everything you do on the internet, and each of those hops only knows a little bit about what's going on. One of them knows the website you're visiting, but doesn't know who you are or anything that's going on with you in your interactions with that website. Another layer knows who you are, but doesn't know, but has layered within the layers of the onion, doesn't know due to encryption what website you're going to or what you're doing with it. And someone in the middle of those two knows neither of those two things. And this is 3 hops, and these are the 3 layers of onions. So when you're browsing, as long as you connect to 3 random people that aren't all unfortunately the same person, as long as they are genuinely random, and there's enough Tor nodes on the network, you can browse basically anonymously without anyone knowing who you are or what you're doing. So that's amazing. That's onion routing. It's very popular. It's not necessarily the best thing. There is some debate about it, but when you're not doing that, we call that the clear net. But Tor is amazing. The onion router is amazing. There's a browser that's configured to use that network called Tor browser, but you can set up any browser like Firefox and probably Chrome. I think you configure it to use the SOX proxy, and you just have to start Tor on your machine and then tell your browser, configure your browser to use it. It's actually pretty simple to do, but there's all these bizarre habits like don't change the shape of the browser after you open it, because if you go on several different websites, the information about the ratio of your browser can reveal that you're the same person on 2 different websites. So there's all these weird things you have to get your head around to not accidentally ruin your anonymity. But nonetheless, why I was talking about this is because I used to watch these digital boot camps with Jacob Appelbaum, and he is fantastic, and I learned so much from that guy. And he was a good friend of Julian Assange's as well. Him and several other people, I think Phil Zimmerman, wrote a book called A Cryptographic Call to Arms, in which this is before COVID and all that. It was just basically Snowden level stuff. Freaking out about 9/11 infringement on civil liberties, or the infringement that resulted after 9/11. And they were sitting there talking and generally freaking out about all the surveillance that's going on. Jacob Appelbaum was great. Eventually he got smeared and destroyed by the Tor community for something I don't really believe happened. Someone I do know not very well, but know personally, was smeared by the same group of people, accused of sexual misconduct, which turned out to be not just, oh, that's an exaggeration. It turned out to be, oh, you weren't even in the same country as the claim that's being made against you. This is completely fake. And it's from this, I want to be careful what I say, but there's someone that's going around making bad sexual assault claims against prominent people in the cypherpunk space that are obviously false. And this happened to Jacob Appelbaum, and he was obviously kicked out of Tor and basically has disappeared from the internet. And I haven't heard anything from the guy in about 7 years. But he was a fantastic resource, and he used to do these wonderful talks. And I learned, he just did a surveillance years ago. He did this surveillance workshop, and he taught people basic public key cryptography. And I want to try and pass on some of that knowledge as well, because public key cryptography is not very well understood, and it's the essence of Bitcoin, and it's the essence of all digital security. And it's not even that hard to understand, but it's just very new to most people. So I'm just going to look at some comments quickly. Hey, Das Record, possible to install and run other naps on a pre-configured MyNode? I don't know. I've never used MyNode. I think I would guess almost certainly yes, you can. I think MyNode works exactly the same way Umbrel works, and even Embassy. It's just Docker containers. The only thing you can't expect when you do that is easy compatibility and it playing ball with everything else, and it showing up in the GUI or the graphical interface. That you can't expect any of that to happen. But you can easily run other apps on those things. You just can't expect them to show up in the GUI or to be automatically configured to interface with everything else. That's what's nice about those node in a box things, is that Lightning, setting up a Lightning node and configuring it to work with Bitcoin does take a lot of tweaking around in the configs, but these boxes automatically make everything, all the related apps all talk to one another in a very convenient way, so you can just plug and play. MyNode and Umbrel and things like that basically just being shell scripts that install a bunch of Docker containers, and boom, they all work together straight away. Embassy being a similar thing, but actually about 10 times more code, and the whole thing becomes a lot more reliable and a lot more plug and play, in my opinion. There's no SSHing. All the configuration can be done in the graphical user interface, which isn't the case for things like MyNode and Umbrel. If you want to do anything deeper in those, you always have to go SSH in. And they're generally less reliable as well. But I mean, there's a reason Embassy is a paid product. But then again, you can compile it from source for free as well. So I'd say Embassy is definitely the way to go with all those sorts of products. Hey BitBoy, thanks for joining. Vaccine mafia are turning the screws. I know, it's fucking insane. But I mean, what the hell am I going to say about that I haven't already cried about on YouTube already? So I just SSH into device and install into which directory. You can install wherever you like, Das Record. There's no rules for that. If you're talking about the binaries, maybe stick them in /usr/bin or /usr/local/bin or something like that. It doesn't really matter. There might be security implications depending on where you install it, but I don't have that depth of knowledge, I'm sorry to say. But maybe let me know what you're installing and I'll think about it. Something maybe a bit more of a detailed answer. So anyway, let's talk about public key cryptography, because it's a good fun topic to discuss, and it's one of those things that's always been really hard to explain. The concept of a cryptographic hash is the thing that I see people talking about on Twitter, saying to one another, has anyone found a way to explain cryptographic hashing in layman's terms? And no one has, that I know of, because every time it's one of those things you have, it's once you understand it, and it's so hard to explain. It's like fractions. They don't make sense, and one day they do make sense, and they're obvious and impossible to explain. Mechanism of ECDSA is genius. I agree. But that's not even cryptographic hashing. That's a public... I humiliate myself on this lately by getting this wrong. ECDSA is just a digital signature algorithm. It's not public keys being derived from private keys via cryptographic hashing. It's just a DSA, or a digital signature algorithm. Or there's a digital signature... Sorry, a digital... What's the word? A public address derivation algorithm. I can't remember exactly the acronym for it, but in ECDSA, Bitcoin's basic address types, before we had schnorr SIGs and all this wonderful stuff, it wasn't a case of cryptographic hashing. It was for signatures and all that, but it wasn't for the actual derivation of the public key. But it's all related anyway, so I will get into that. You don't understand cryptographic hashing? Well, let me explain it. This is what I want to explain. So, the way I like to talk about it is clock math. If everyone knows what clock math is, you've got 12 numbers, and unfortunately most of you are North American, so you go from 12 o'clock back to 12 o'clock, and you never go above 12. But the rest of the world, as far as I know, goes to 13, and we go all the way up to 24. Now, the reason that's helpful to understand is because you get used to modulo arithmetic just being able to tell the time in Europe, because 13 o'clock is really just 1 o'clock again, and 14 o'clock is really just 2 o'clock, and so on, and all the way around to 24 o'clock. And what we're doing is we're using mod 12. We're saying we have a finite set between the number 0 and 12, and we will compress all data after the number 12 to be between those two numbers again. So 13 is really just 1, and 25 is really just 1, and 37 is really just 1. And the point is, that's a form of compression of data, because you're going around and you're counting to 12, and then you restart and restart and restart. But what's amazing about it is no one knows whether, if you say, okay, it's 1 o'clock, is it 1 o'clock in the morning or is it 1 o'clock at night? Who knows? Because you have to say AM or PM. Unless you're specific and you undo the modulation and go, it's 13 o'clock. That's how you can actually tell. But the point is, if you were to go on forever with it, rather than reset every 24 hours, if you were to go on forever with this, like supposing we did this, 64 times in a row for a whole month or something like that. Each day, the first of the month at midnight, it was 0 o'clock. And on the second of the month, it was really 24 o'clock. And on the third of the month, it was 36 o'clock. Imagine if we did that for an entire month and ended up at 30 times 12. Then you'd end up with these huge numbers. But in order to facilitate everyday telling of the time, you'd still modulate by 12 and tell people, oh, it's 3 o'clock. When really it was, some multiple of 12 plus 3. So the point with this is, if I tell you it's 1 o'clock, you don't know whether it's really 1 o'clock or 13 o'clock or 25 o'clock relative to that initial 0, because that data got lost in the modulo function. And what that means is, this is the most primitive example of a cryptographic hash. That the way this works is, you can take any number and put it through, you can modulate it, I think that's the right term, apologies if it's not, you can go modular with it and end up with a smaller number that is within a finite set. So you can take any number in the universe and put it through a hashing algorithm and it will spit out something that's between 2 points. And if you go large enough with that set and you use a sophisticated enough algorithm, just like with the clock math, you can't go backwards. You can't, if I tell you it's 1 o'clock, you really don't know whether it's 1 or 13 or 25 or any other multiple of 12 plus 1. You don't know that because that information got destroyed. You did a one-way mathematical function. It's the same thing with cryptographic hashing. It's a lot more sophisticated, of course, but the point is it only goes in one direction. That is why if you have a Bitcoin address, that can't be taken and turned back in to the initial private key, because the initial private key has all the information and the Bitcoin address has some of it, and a bunch of information was lost when it was put through this function, and that information can't be put back unless you brute force, which is called checking every single input to see if it matches the output. Now, of course, you can't do that with the clock analogy, that's where it breaks down. But the point is, imagine if you had some other data to help you out when it comes to telling the time, and someone tells you it's 1 o'clock and you need to figure out what day of the month it is and what the real time is. Is it 1? Is it 13? Is it 25? Is it 37? What you would do is you would try all of these multiples of 12 plus 1 until you got the one that gave you the right 1 o'clock. And I hope I haven't lost anyone there at that point. But the reason that works is because there's no shortcut. And this is the whole proof of work element that comes with Bitcoin mining, which is really just checking different hash outputs. There's no predictable outcome. You try stuff, and eventually you go, we finally found the right one. So what that means is guesswork is your best bet, and there's no shortcuts. So that's why cryptographic hashing, that's roughly an outline of how cryptographic hashing works. And it's just pure math. And that's why it's so reliable. There's no store your password here in this database that probably won't get hacked. It's really make a random number, hash it into something that's public information, and then it doesn't matter who gets that public information because the math doesn't allow you to go backwards. It just says you've got to guess random numbers until you come up with something that can be put into this hashing algorithm that scrapes a bunch of data off it, turns it into a deterministic output that you can share with the world. And to go deeper, if that's a Bitcoin address, if there's Bitcoin sitting at that address and you spend Bitcoin sitting at that address, you generate a transaction that says, I'm going to move money from this address to some other address, and you sign that transaction with the original private number. And because of the magic of cryptography, everyone can say, whoever signed this transaction knew that original number, but you still can't know what that original number is unless they tell you. That is hocus pocus to me, and I don't understand cryptography as deeply as I should to know how that works specifically, but that's just beyond my level, sadly. But that's the basic principle of how Bitcoin addresses work. And I'm round that off there and take a look at the comments. I see quite a few comments here. It takes, hey Prem, I say it takes some arbitrary amount of data, and through an automated mechanism, it creates a shorter piece of data which can be used to identify the original without revealing it. Exactly. Flipping bits, ones and zeros. Modulo is everything. I know. Percent sign in Python all day. It is like a projection map in linear algebra. Geesh, I've got 7 viewers and you all know what it is already. Well, don't worry, this is going to help someone out nonetheless. It is like a projection map in linear algebra, then to a lower dimension. I am not sure how that information lost is available to verify, though, as part of the hashing. Yeah, so I guess there's a lot of things to really say about it, but public key cryptography is... I share Julian Assange's sort of open, amazement at this mechanism, this mathematical reality, and I see it as there was Einstein figuring out, the ramifications of being able to split the atom, and whoever this reality in physics, it exists in this universe, and it's got this powerful, this powerful ramification. And the fact that public key cryptography exists because maths exists the way it exists, logic exists the way it exists in this universe and is unchangeable. The fact that that's the case, wow, it means that we have a fighting chance, guys. We actually can live in the digital world and have privacy. We can have the benefit of not just being able to talk to our neighbor or our best friend who we trust in private, leave our phone outside of the room and say something like, oh, I'm Guy Fawkes, I'm going to blow up the Parliament building or something like that. And you can have those kinds of conversations globally with anyone and have the same or even better expectation of privacy, but with all this added feature of just being able to talk to anyone anywhere. That's incredible. And the only reason it's possible is because of public key cryptography. Otherwise you've got to use symmetric key, and that doesn't work, sadly. And remember how valuable this was. I'm sure most of you know this, but when RSA was first invented, it was illegal. It was a treasonous offense for an American to tell anyone how this thing worked. And that's why Adam Back, ultimate legend that he is, a very probable inventor of Bitcoin, one of the likely candidates, he created a Perl script that would do this cryptographic, hocus pocus, and it was so basic that it could be included in email signatures. And his point was, let's defy this law on such a wide scale that it becomes just so unenforced that it eventually gets dropped, and it has. And now public key cryptography RSA is everywhere, which is great. Thanks to Adam Back for saying we're going to break this law on such a scale that it just, eventually it just becomes demonstrably useless. And that's another thing we owe Adam Back for. Then he invented proof of work too, which is basically what makes Bitcoin solve the Byzantine generals problem. Holy shit, did Adam Back do a lot for this space. I'm not going to annoy him with allegations that he is Satoshi, because he gets it all day, every day anyway. Weirdly, I don't think it's him, and most people that know him don't think it's him either, though he would be a very likely candidate, of course. I've got high information followers. Don't be surprised we follow along. Yeah, I know. I'm glad of that. Maybe I need to dumb this down a bit and put some red arrows in the thumbnail and sit here like this pointing at the camera and just pointing, not at that, but at a chart of Bitcoin and dollar signs and just green this and red that, and just then I'd get 100,000 views on these YouTube videos, right, rather than 6. I think maybe it's worth doing that a little bit, just make some sort of Faustian bargain and get some viewers, because I want people to know this information. That's why I do this. I want people to know this stuff. It's powerful. There's no feeling like teaching, and it helps me learn this stuff better anyway. It's also humiliating because I learn a lot of this stuff in public. And I get some brutal comments, guys. Brutal. If I make a mistake, people will just, oh my god, I'll get taken to the cleaners for it. But at least I learn from that. Or I try to anyway. Try not to let my ego get in the way. You have a decent engineering background. It took a while to convince yourself that this is the deal. How will this reach the guy that takes the fall booster of Pfizer? I don't know, man. Like it's almost like we've handed the planet to. I'm sorry, I'm going off on COVID again. I have to. We've handed everything we can in a in a beautiful box and handed it to the drug companies, because as has been pointed out, all the patents are expiring and all the generic medication, and there's just no money in it anymore. So they have to invent new medicines that they can patent really easy. And mRNA technology is perfect because you only have to make minor variations and you can keep refreshing the patents all the time. There's nothing generic about them. They're so specific. So if they're going after something like a coronavirus or a cold, which famously just keeps changing all the time, Das Record, you might be able to like call me out here if I'm talking shit. But if you can, the money you can make off this, not to mention the fact that you're adding into the mix that this is known to be a particularly unreliable vaccine. As so many people have taken the vaccine and they're doing awfully anyway. Israel's data is unequivocally saying, wow, vaccinations make barely any difference to your ability to catch it, and they don't stop you from passing it on. Maybe they lessen your symptoms, but the fact that these vaccines are just they're basically gearing up. Canada has said, we've decided for the next 4 years we've bought enough doses to give everyone, I don't know, 300 shots every fucking week or something. I don't know how many they've decided, but they've paid for them. Trudeau announced it, so they're gonna use them. And if your vaccine just needs endless boosters and boosters and boosters, like it's just free money. It's free money, and if it's all mandatory, then we don't even have a choice anymore. It's like they're telling you one of your meals every week's got to be McDonald's. McDonald's is going to be happy to hear that if it's legally mandated for you to eat their food. I don't want these drugs. I don't want it. COVID is not a worrying disease to me, but my government is stealing my money and buying it and telling me I've got to take it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to suffer a lot of inconvenience and violations of my civil liberties. This is so stupid. And it's annoying to be, disregarded for having these opinions just because they are incompatible with, your midwit intelligence, basically. It's dumb to be just a mindless, knee-jerk anti-vaxxer and paranoid about all authority. It is. I'm in bad company, but at the same time, this isn't right. It's just obviously not morally justified what's going on here, and people need to stand up for it, stand up to it, rather. What are you saying here, Das Record? Something about discovering Bitcoin reminds me of when the MP3 encoder. That's actually a great. I can explain hashing to musicians, or at least musicians that know how to use DAWs and stuff like that. That's quite easy because they all understand that if you lost the master but you have an MP3, you're fucked because you can't turn an MP3 back into the WAV that you were initially bounced or rendered from your DAW. You can't do it because the data was lost and it can't be put back again. So yeah, actually explaining it to digitally capable musicians, I can explain hashing to them because they understand what loss is. They understand the loss of data in a one-way sense. There are compression algorithms where you don't lose data, but turning a WAV or an AIF or an OGG file into an MP3, that's a loss. That's lossy compression. That's not lossless, which means it only goes in one direction. Music atomic without losing perceptual resolution. World has never been the same. I don't know what you mean by that exactly. That's a little out of my depth when you say music is being made atomic. The Bitcoin as an independent arrow of time. That was 6 months of my life. Haven't regretted it. Yeah, well, 6 months you say? I mean, is that when you got into Bitcoin 6 months ago? Oh my God, you're a baby. I can't stop. It's been 10 years now and I'm still obsessed with this thing. What shall we do here, guys? We could take a look at some silly stuff. Let me see. Did that change my screen here? It did. All right. So we are breaking. Why not? Let's go over some news. Hey, Bitcoin Magazine. They have some great news. Shout out to Bitcoin Magazine. We've got some stuff going on. Someone is New Jersey going after BlockFi. That's fun. BlockFi deserved to completely collapse as a business. What do we have here? We have basically a very ugly looking market for Bitcoin. It looks like I really hope to see a nasty little something like that. I really hope to see it. Maybe even much more short term than that, you know, and start up here afterwards. I really want to see something like this. This would be the best buy ever. This would be like it was in March 12th last year. It would be so good to do. This was just the biggest no-brainer buy of my life. And I sent everything I had that day to buy as much Bitcoin as I could. And we never went that low again. Look at the volume on it. We need something like that now. If we had some horrible, horrendous crash that was way worse than this, all the way down to 22k or something, can you imagine the absolute wreckage? Because when Bitcoin goes down, the shitcoins go down harder. Like, Dogecoin is just an absolute basket case now. Let's take a look at the data. What have we got here? I mean, oh dear. Let's take a look at all data. Look at Dogecoin. Look at how far down it's gone. It was all the way up to what? I think it was up at 70 cents at one point. It's really hard to see. Actually, let's just zoom in a little bit. Here we are at 68 cents a Doge, and now we're down here 17 cents. This was the height of Elon's idiocy, and oh my god, does he look like a dummy? Oh my god. And this is over, guys. This is an inflationary currency. There's no reason to hold this thing apart from just partaking in the irrational investing that is modern day, you know, modern postmodern existence, which is nothing has to have any truth to it. Let's just be retarded. So that's what we're doing. That's why we're buying GameStop. That's why we're buying. There's an excellent article by Jimmy Song on this postmodern investing. We spoke about it a bit on Tone's on Tone's last news show, Tone Vase, and that was a lot of fun. Anyway, we should get back to the surveillance stuff, the digital self-sovereignty workshop. Yeah, so a lot of those things I was learning from Jacob Applebaum about the basics of public key cryptography. If you're watching this, I hope you're interested, because the point is, if you use something like PGP, which was a protocol, a pretty good privacy, developed by Phil Zimmerman in, I think, the late 80s or the early 90s, it basically meant, you know, you could take some public information, put it out there, and essentially the entire world had a box with your name on it that they knew was yours. They'd have to verify it was yours, actually. That is one threat, actually, is do you know it's really the public key of the person you're trying to send a message to? But nonetheless, yeah, PGP does make you feel like James Bond. PGP is incredible. So it's basically someone leaving open boxes all over the universe and saying, here is my box, and it's got a lock inside it as part of the mechanism. You can write a letter to me and put it in this box, close it and lock it, and no one in the universe can unlock it apart from me. So I'm going to leave them everywhere, and once your letter is in that box and locked, no one else can see it. And that's what PGP is. So if you get anyone's PGP key, you can write them a letter, you encrypt it using their PGP public key, and they can only decrypt it using their private key. And again, the public key is a hash of the private key. I think that's right. I don't think PGP uses ECDSA. Feel free to correct me. My chat knows more than me about this stuff, it seems. But yeah, I think it derives it using a hashing algorithm, which means as long as you know your PGP private key, well, this would be true if it was a public key derivation scheme as well, or I don't know. It would be true either way, but the point is, if you have your private key, that's all you need. You can regenerate your public key, you can give it to anyone anytime you like, they can write anything to you privately, encrypt it using that public key, and there you go. Before all this technology, we had symmetric key cryptography, which means if you want to write me a letter, you need to give me your private key, and I use that to lock, to encrypt the text, to turn it into ciphertext from plain text. And then you use the same key, a symmetrical key, to unlock it again. The problem with that is you need to learn what my private key is. I need to share that information with other people. The whole point of public key cryptography is that you are the only one that ever needs to know your private key. anyone else can just know your public key, and they can use that to encrypt data that can only be decrypted by the private key that was used to generate the public key. And before this NSA protected technology, before this was known, before we split the cryptographic atom like this, everything was, cipher technologies. All of the ciphers that existed before that were things like one-time pads and Caesar ciphers and things like that. Literally things where it's like, okay, we'll take all of the letters of the alphabet and turn the A into an F and the G into a U, and that's I can't remember the name of that kind of cipher, but all of these are codes that can be cracked. They're all forms of cryptography. They're all basic. But the point is, in that case, both the person, the communicator, and the communicatee both need to know the private information. Public key cryptography says only the person that generates the public key needs to know that information. And that's a huge difference. I'm so glad someone agrees with me that using PGP does make you feel very powerful. And GPG, confusingly, is an implementation of PGP. PGP is just a protocol, it's not a program. GPG is the implementation we will use. That stands for GNU Privacy Guard. I'm pretty sure Richard Stallman had some involvement in it. It's not hard to use, and it can be very integrated with your desktop or whatever computer you're using. There's even a mail client, GPG Mail, I think. There's a whole suite. I think they ask for donations when you download, but they're not doing much more than that. 6 months of 3 years now. So you've been a Bitcoiner for 3 years, but you've been... I don't know how the 6 months relates to that. MP3 file, iPod, iPhone, everything else, but all started with the protocol. Prem Lee, I would appreciate your mentioning anything to do with the extent to which the open source projects we rely on have been audited. Open source means we can be, but not necessarily has. Open source, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, in some sense, it's even a false sense of security, if you want to be pessimistic about it. It sucks. And you have Greg Maxwell bemoaning it with Taproot. He's like, look, just because it's out there in the open doesn't mean anyone's actually reading it and reviewing it. And a lot of the time, people, when it comes to something so critical as Bitcoin, even that, people will be like, look, I'm not going to review this proposal until it might actually become active on the network. Then it matters, because I don't want to review it, and then it doesn't even get activated anyway, because then I just wasted my time. So a lot of the time, people will actually just wait for other people to do it. I'm guilty. I barely know how to read C++, so I've not done a lot of reviewing when it comes to Bitcoin at all. I trust that a lot of other people have, but that's not great. We don't need to be doing that. It's a false sense of security in some senses, but it's not entirely unjustified as a sense of security either. You're not going to use Bitcoin if it's not open source. Let's be realistic. No way would that even work, because open source doesn't just mean anyone can read it. Open source means anyone can contribute as well, right? And if closed source implies that, closed source is why we have the open source movement. Well, specifically with Richard Stallman, to mention him again, he was using Unix and said, these bugs are destroying my workflow, here's a fix, Unix. And Unix went, we're not going to include that in our operating system. So then he goes off and writes GNU, which turns into GNU Linux, and now everything is Linux because of that little story. But the fact that that happened is another example of why closed source is not acceptable, because companies are not... Safari is closed source, right? If you want to change the way Safari works, even if you want to improve it, the very act of you writing some code for it doesn't mean Apple is actually going to take it and use it, does it? So, it doesn't really help you out a lot there. So there's other parts about being open source that means, yeah, it's good. But I mean, again, it's like decentralization. It's not on or off. Like, is Bitcoin Core source code reviewed? Yes. Is it reviewed enough? Well, some would say yes, some would say no. Open source projects, generally, it would help to have as many eyes on the code as possible. But let's be real, most people just aren't going to do it. It looks like, for whatever reason, these are just one of the things that I like to worry about with Bitcoin. But I always have to remember that Bitcoin gets the free miracles. It always does. And it kind of deserves them as well, remember? Bitcoin it's so much better than the next best thing that even when Bitcoin does have a bad day, even if it does suffer a bug, we get around it because we have to. There's no alternative. We don't all go, that's it, we're giving up and moving to Bcash. That's not going to happen, because that's already been designed to fail. You'd have to completely replace the whole system to make it work at all. Bitcoin might need its tires patching every now and again, but it's nice to talk about. It makes me feel like I'm being a bit more honest, because I constantly have to posture about how perfect and wonderful Bitcoin is, because most people just think it's a complete joke. So, we have to talk there about it, and go, this thing is actually amazing and powerful and anti-fragile and all that. But of course it has problems. And of course it's not perfect, but, I think we do pretty well. So when it comes to the open source nature of it, all you can really do is, just like everything else in Bitcoin, say, the fact that you can run a node, the fact that you can verify that you have the Bitcoins you do, means that when you don't bother doing that, you're probably still okay. It's the same mentality, right? If you buy a Trezor and you set up a wallet and you receive some Bitcoin in it, and you think you receive some Bitcoin in it, but you're not actually running a node, it's just, your addresses are being checked, they're calling home to one of Trezor's nodes, and Trezor are saying, check in with the blockchain, and saying, yeah, you have some Bitcoin. Trezor could be lying to you. If you were buying Bitcoin from Trezor and you're asking them, did I really get that Bitcoin? Then that's a crazy amount of trust to put into someone. But the fact that so many people in Bitcoin can and do run nodes means that Trezor would also be crazy to try and pull anything like that. So that's why the fact that even if you can't review the source code in Bitcoin, even if you can't, the fact that so many other people can means that it's very unlikely we get people sticking malicious code into there, because it's going to get caught by someone, probably, but I don't want to encourage complacency. So just like with running a full node, you should run a full node, even though the fact that you can makes it not necessarily essential. You still should, because you still should be an adult and you still should be responsible and check this stuff personally. You shouldn't trust, you should verify. That goes for the code too. So if you want to do it, learn Python, learn Rust, but obviously you've got to learn C++. That's the main part of Bitcoin. That's the main. There's a lot of libraries written in Python, and there's, there's some of the setup scripts and things of Python, but the bulk of it is C++. And it's not a crazy hard language to learn, but do read it. There are bugs in Bitcoin, and occasionally they're fatal, and they get fixed before anyone actually manages to exploit them, but it happens. So if you know C++, especially if you're a computer scientist, yes, you should be reading that code. And if you're not doing it, you're relying on someone else to catch the bugs, and they might not catch them. And if you're a Bitcoiner like I am, it's our only hope. Do it. Like, don't hold naively and blindly if you can. If you can avoid that, then please do. So what's next? I'm just going to check that my software is working out all right. It looks fine. Your open box analogy is apt. I sometimes imagine Bitcoin as a global food bank that anyone can draw from as long as your actions are in accordance with the rule set. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I'm glad you like the open box analogy. When seed words are generated, are they truly random? Depends how they're generated, man. If you generate them using, if you roll a dice, I don't know, what is it, 96 times or something that you have to roll a dice to generate, but it's a weighted dice, then no, they're not being randomly generated. If the computer you're doing it on is compromised in such a way as to make you generate predictable private keys that, are a result of malware that's on your device or compromised hardware, then no, they won't be random. They'll be known to someone else. What they generate will be something that's predictable by someone else. Randomness is the essence of cryptography, which is a good thing for me to bring up here. This is very appropriate for this stream. You cannot have security without randomness when it comes to cryptography. Predictability is the enemy, and that's why humans can't be trusted to generate cryptographically secure numbers, because we don't think randomly, we think in patterns, and that's why we need trusted electronic devices that can generate random things for us. I mean, randomness is interesting. We can use radioactive decay to generate randomness. That's quite fun that we do that. I know blockchain.com used to use stuff going on in the atmosphere that would detect that was random, and use that to generate some of the randomness for private keys. There was a funny story about how wrong that went, because they were making all their requests over HTTP, which is non-encrypted request, which is bad enough, but then the website it was from a website called random.org that they used to do this. I need to tell this story just to shit on blockchain.com just because of how disgraceful they are. they got the random data for private keys partly from a website called random.org, which is not secure for the purposes of generating Bitcoin private keys. But to make matters worse, they did it over http://random.org, not https://. The S stands for secure socket layer. That's when you have a secure. You're not going to go on any websites that don't have an S pretty much anymore, because that's another part of public key cryptography. And it's how you have secure connections with the websites you're on, and man-in-the-middle attacks and eavesdropping can't be pulled off because you have a secure connection between the two of you. Now, that what they were doing meant that the random data they were pulling could be leaked or observed by eavesdroppers, and now that's not good. That's irresponsible of them to be doing that. That's criminally negligent for an online wallet. But to make matters laughable after that, random.org deprecated its HTTP, the requests made over HTTP. It wouldn't allow people to make requests over that anymore, for good reason. They were saying, if you're trying to generate cryptographically secure randomness from our website, you shouldn't be doing it via HTTP because it's not secure. So what they would do is send an error message saying something along the lines of, stop using HTTP, you idiot. And so for an entire year, some of the random data that was used to generate blockchain.com wallets was a consistent set of data, a consistent string that said, stop using HTTP, you idiot. It wasn't random data, it was the same thing, and it was telling them they were idiots. And I don't, that wasn't the exact quote, but it was an error message saying don't use HTTP. And then someone spotted that a bunch of wallets were being created and that weren't actually random, and it was a guy called Joe Ho, I think was his name. I can't remember. He runs a mempool statistics website. He's a good guy in the community. Bit of a bee casher for my taste, but he's created some useful resources, and he was very honourable there. He swept all the money and went, I don't know who did this, but I've got a bunch of your money. If you can prove it's yours, I'll give it back to you. And then we figured out it was blockchain.com, and I think he returned everyone's money. I don't know if he got rewarded for it, but it was a laughable story. And it's one of the many reasons that blockchain.com is one of the blights on our Bitcoin industry. We hate it. We absolutely hate it. It's like Coinbase. It's one of these companies that's done nothing but attack and attack and attack and make clown mistakes. Another one like BlockFi, which is why I'm kind of happy that BlockFi is in the news and having a bad time. I'd really like for BlockFi to collapse at this point. They're obviously incompetent. They're another Mt. Gox waiting to happen. They're shitcoiners. They encourage worse practices. They do over-compliance so as to save themselves legal headache, but to create negative precedents in the Bitcoin space. If you try and deposit Bitcoin on BlockFi that comes from a coin join, they'll close your account for it. That's asshole behavior. That's teaching people not to respect their own privacy. Bitcoin is a protocol that allows you to respect your own privacy, and it's a human right. And that fuck any company that is moving against you. And it's not required for BlockFi to do that. This is just over-compliance and bootlicking on their part. So screw them. Anyway, BitBoy, that was a bit of a tangent. Can you explain how soft forks work and how they are communicated? Is that a vulnerability when that happens? Soft forks are when we want to add a new rule into the Bitcoin code base that doesn't violate any of the existing rules that are being enforced by the current nodes. And that's what that does is it allows us to upgrade in a backward compatible manner. The way I describe it is it's like adding a word to the English language. Anyone can do it, and if it gets adopted, it will spread, and there you go, everyone uses that word. Like, maybe you can, an example is like TikTok. What's that? It's a company now. Like, okay, that existed before. That's more of a hard fork, frankly. Bad analogy. So supposing you just invent a new word, you start using it, it catches on, and it spreads like a meme. That's a soft fork. And it's not really a lot of effort to do. It just requires something that a lot of people want, or enough people want that it spreads. And that's it. That's you can do it today if you want. Yes, it is an attack vector because you can add undesirable rules and you don't need a majority for the thing to happen. You can do it with a minority, and that's why we have most of the upgrades we have. Taproot is still only being enforced by a minority, but the fact is Taproot is a soft fork, so it doesn't break existing compatibility. We've added in functionality to Bitcoin that doesn't break anything. Soft forks are, ironically, they're the most forceful way to upgrade Bitcoin because they don't require active measures on part of the inert network. The inert network can ignore it and roll on as normal while things are changing without them actually noticing it. But it does mean that the rule you add has to not break any of the existing rules, so you're quite confined with what you can do. You can conceivably have malicious soft forks that where they add in a rule like this stupid Mara pool trying to say OFAC compliant block. You could have a soft fork where you say we are going to externally impose a condition on mining where on ourselves, where we only allow ourselves to mine blocks that have been generated with a certain percentage of renewable energy, or only include transactions that aren't coin joins or provably from a darknet market or something like that. You can do that amongst yourselves, and if you're only a few percent, whatever. But if you say after a year we're going to start rejecting blocks that don't do it because we have another rule now that we've added in, and if you don't comply to the rule while we're not breaking any of yours, you might start breaking ours because we have a tighter set of conditions, we have a tighter rule set. So what does that mean? That means that the network can get upgraded, sort of. What is the language? I mean, I've heard Andreas use the restaurant analogy where it's like if you have a bunch of omnivores and then you say, okay, this table is going to be for just vegetarians. The point is the vegetarians aren't breaking the omnivores' rules because omnivores can eat vegetables. The soft fork is the sudden adding of a rule of no meat, and everyone can work together. But once the vegetarians reach a certain size, the omnivores have to start becoming vegetarians too because there's no meat. Because if they eat meat, they're breaking the new rule set, which is no more meat. And a hard fork is when you say, okay, veggies, I need you to start eating meat. Vegetarians, that's a hard fork because you have to break rules suddenly. You have to tell people. That's what making blocks bigger with Bcash was. They had to say, all right, existing network, we're going to break your rule of 1 megabyte block. We need them to be bigger than that. And the minute you do that, you splinter off in your own direction because there's always going to be a few stragglers. And with the case with Bcash, 99% of people ignored it and went on like normal and went, whatever, go off with your fork off. And that's a hard fork. So, yeah, a soft fork is exactly an attack. The reason it can be an attack is because it can be done with a minority. And in fact, every upgrade we do in Bitcoin is done with a minority because most people are just inert and just watching as things roll over. SegWit was done with a tiny minority of who I was a part. And Taproot was done with a minority as well. That's just how upgrades work, and that's the way we do it. Eventually the network all moves along. Like SegWit's been here for 4 years now, and what do we have? Thanks to all the turbulence and the drop in hash rate and the very long time between blocks, we had a few exchanges go, fine, we'll use SegWit. We will save ourselves money and stop spamming the blockchain with needlessly large transactions because we refuse to use the SegWit upgrade for political reasons. We finally had that go, all right, it's costing us too much money now and we're losing out to competition because our customers basically are paying the fees. It's not, if you want to do a withdrawal for an exchange and they're not batching and they're not even using nested SegWit, they're using legacy addresses. If they're going to do all this stuff and charge you for it as a customer, you're going to find someone else. I mean, these services like Strike exist now. Bull Bitcoin exists. They do run a coin join. When you do a withdrawal from Bull Bitcoin, they say, okay, wait an hour for this coin join. And everyone else doing a withdrawal too gets to participate in it. And then it's a free transaction for the user. Bull Bitcoin covers the cost of that coin join, but that coin join has like a whole ton of transactions in it. Usually about 100, I believe. So anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but yeah, soft forks are how we upgrade the network, but they are limited in nature to what does not conflict with the existing rule set. That's why they're called soft, but in reality they are more forceful than hard forks. Anyone can hard fork Bitcoin today and go off on their own, and probably they will be going off on their own. It's more violent, but at the same time everyone can ignore you. The trouble with the soft fork is that you can't ignore them because this is the risk of wipeout. That's the one thing I want to point out about soft forks. Bitcoin nodes will accept the longest valid proof of work chain. And if, we're at block 100,000, and then you get block 100,001, 100,002, and as long as they're all valid and they fit within the rules of your node, you'll accept them. And what would happen if you got block 100,000 and you're looking for 100,001 and it arrives, and then there's 100,002, it arrives, but then suddenly you become aware of a chain that's all the way up to 100,020. You just abandon, but it has a different 100,001, 100,002. It's different there, but you just didn't know about this longer chain. In that case, what your node by default does is it throws away the 100,001, 100,002 that you thought were being worked on to 100,003, throws those two away, and accepts the new chain with an extra 20 blocks because it's longer. It's got more cumulative proof of work, and it's still valid. Now, the problem with soft forks being done as a minority is they can kind of be invisible for a while. You're enforcing a new rule set, and if the soft fork doesn't have the whole network going along with it by the time it activates, then the soft forkers might have a minority hash rate for a while, which means they will have a shorter chain, which means your node will ignore it. But your node accepts the rules of this chain. The people running nodes on the soft fork chain do not accept your rules because they're vegans, right? They're vegetarians, you're omnivores. So they've added a rule, and the activation for the new upgrade has come around. It's block 100,000, active with our upgrade. Soft forkers aren't really supported yet, they're a minority. Block 101, 100,001, 100,002, 100,003 happens on the normal chain without the new upgrade, without the extra rule complying block. All of the nodes, the minority of nodes on the soft fork chain, ignore these new blocks because they don't fit within a new tighter rule set. And maybe it takes them a month because they're a minority to find one more block. They go up to block 100,001. It takes them another month, 100,002. The old chain with the looser rule set is, up to 120,000, 130,000. It's gone up, 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 up. But the problem with that is that longer chain will accept this shorter chain if it ever manages to get longer, because it doesn't break any of their rules. All it needs to do is get longer. The shorter chain doesn't have to worry about the old longer chain, because that longer chain violates their rules, so they will reliably ignore it forever. So it's asymmetric risk here. The soft forkers, while they might suffer a bit of slowed block time, eventually can swallow and wipe out the longer chain because they have a tighter rule set, but they're still valid to those guys that haven't upgraded yet. The other way around is not true. If you have a longer chain on the non-soft fork side, those guys can't ever swallow the soft fork side because the soft fork side says, we have a new rule, you're breaking our rule, we're not going to accept it. I hope that makes sense. It's quite a complicated thing to explain, but wipeout risk doesn't exist on both sides when you're doing a soft fork. The soft forkers, by adding a rule, can tolerate a period of very slow blocks and being in a minority. The other side has to remain in a majority forever, and if they ever slip to a minority and get overtaken by the soft fork, they get wiped out. All of those blocks they heard of, they're now gone. All of the transactions within them, who knows, might be double spent. So basically it creates existential risk. All that is to say, if you do this, if there's a soft fork going on that you don't know about, it poses existential risk to you as a miner and a node operator because it could eventually eat the longer chain. So any soft fork over a few percent of support is an existential threat and something that needs to be paid attention to. That is how an intolerant minority can upgrade the Bitcoin network. And that's what happened with SegWit. Because there was only about 1,000 of us, and I admit that about 500 of those were just Amazon Web Server nodes that people were spinning up to help us posture. And we were saying to all the Goliaths, all the big mining pools, we're going to wipe out your chain. We're running our own soft fork client. We're going to reject your blocks come the 1st of August 2017. We're going to reject them unless they flip the bit to activate SegWit. And they were like, haha, no you're not. There's only a few of you. And eventually they went, all right, we capitulate. So they did, because you just can't run like that. And so to really answer your question, BitBoy, the fact that it can be done with such a small group of people, just like if you want to add a word to the whole English language, it only takes you and 5 other people to go, hey, we invented this meme, 420, and now 420 means weed smoke. Like, the fact that that can spread around thanks to a few small people is kind of frightening, because you can change something as big as Bitcoin. You know, it's kind of scary. But these things need coordination nonetheless, and I don't know. It's one of these things that, fortunately, if miners coordinate an unwanted soft fork upgrade amongst themselves, it is a bit of an issue, and it is something that your core client will warn you about in the command line if there are unknown version bits. And it's worrying. Like, you run Bitcoin Core from the command line, and it says, warning, 50 of the last however many blocks, unexpected version bit, meaning, like, you know, miners flip version bits in order to use ASIC boost, which means, you know, get more proof of work done. That isn't really work. It's just using less electricity for the same, you know, amount of... It increases their ability to find a block without spending as much electricity doing it. And yeah, I get it. It's called ASIC boost. It's kind of a bug, to be honest, in Bitcoin's protocol. Like, I wish they weren't doing it. And it gave... that was the whole reason they wanted to block SegWit anyway, is because they didn't want to have to do this publicly, because they wanted to maintain their advantage. One mining pool called Antminer. I digress. Anyway, my point with all that is... Do I forget what my point with all that? Probably. No, what I'm saying is unexpected version bits are to be expected, because that's just part of how miners mine now. It's a bug within the protocol. But, I mean, we could fix it. As far as I know, it hasn't been fixed. And that's that. I don't think they're going to coordinate and create a soft fork. They could try, and it would be very annoying if they do. If Mara Pool tried to pull something like that, like say, okay, all blocks have got to be OFAC compliant now. The trouble is, it's for them, the trouble is there's nothing internal to Bitcoin's protocol that understands that external condition imposed on it. You can just write Mara Pool verified, you know, OFAC compliant block in some pool from slush, in some block from slush pool that isn't. What are they going to do about it? You know, they can't do anything. It's not internal. It's not native to Bitcoin's blockchain. Those conditions. Oh, was it mined using hydroelectricity or coal? Oh, it was mined using coal. All right, our protocol's going to reject it. That would require some sort of communication done outside of, you know, outside of Bitcoin's actual protocol, and all that stuff's corruptible. And I don't know. It would be a nightmare if it happened, but I don't see it happening. Thankfully, I can't really articulate why I don't see that happening. But apparently I'm right, because it should have happened by now and it hasn't. Alright, so that feels addressed. I hope I explained soft forks well there. It's quite a difficult thing to get my head round, or to get one's head round. Anybody else here like Ocean's 13, rigging the dice? I don't remember it. I watched Ocean's 11. I think I watched the other two, and they just weren't anything like as good. One should write a book about how BTC and associated systems could have failed in the years since documenting all these bloopers. Yeah, I mean, we could have failed. The initial inflation bug, where someone mined a few billion bitcoins in one block, that was rough. But I mean, we were so young then that Satoshi basically just went and fixed it. I don't know. It's another free miracle. I don't give Vitalik the same leeway when it comes to fixing the DAO hack, but the DAO hack was far more violating to the principles of what a decentralized world computer is supposed to be. You're not supposed to be able to stop it like that for one of the contracts running on it. The Bitcoin equivalent would have been us returning the Mt. Gox coins to the owners. Like, no way, we're not going to do that. Mt. Gox is something sitting on top of Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin itself. So when Ethereum went, oh, one of the contracts that we're all heavily invested in, you know, fell apart, so we're going to butcher the Ethereum chain to fix it. You know, that's just ridiculous. And the fact that they did that was just not forgivable, in my opinion. That was, you know, I was ready that day. I was like, oh, Ethereum Classic, interesting. You guys have integrity. And that chain's dead, and it gets 51% attacked, like, on a weekly basis. So, what a joke. There are a few good books. The Fork Wars book is really good. BitBoy, if you want to read that. And then I have the Fork Wars is a video on my channel about the same topic. I can't remember what the BitMEX research book is called. It's not called Fork Wars. It's called The Block Size Wars. That's it. Definitely a good book. Definitely read it. So a 51% attack is in fact a soft fork. Let me make sure that's correct. I think it is. Yes, because you're not... No, it's not a soft fork because you're not changing... I don't know, you've stumped me there. It's a similar mechanism. It's probably different semantically, but it's pretty similar. If you decide to... You're changing the rule... No, the reason it's different is because a 51% attack usually is meant to imply a bad actor, not a group of bad actors. So a soft fork usually comes from a large enough group of people that want to impose a change on Bitcoin, a backwards compatible change. A 51% attack is more a bad entity that wants to... Yes, they do want to... No, I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. They're not exactly the same thing, but I can't put my finger on why. Thank you for... I'm glad you liked the Fork War video. A 51% attack, it does have the same... A lot of it's very similar and reminiscent of what goes on in soft forks. But no, sorry. Apologies for all the mental fog here. What the answer to your question is the fact that a 51% attack, the reason a soft fork is an existential threat to people ignoring the soft fork is because of the risk of wipeout. And wipeout is what a 51% attack is. That's all. In reality, the 51% attack is a bit of a myth. But the reason, if you were ignoring a soft fork and you got wiped out because the soft forkers eventually managed to get larger than 50% of the hash rate and caught up to your chain, you would consider what they're doing a 51% attack. Absolutely. But it isn't that from the perspective of anyone else. It's only that from the perspective of the now minority hash rate. So, and depending on what, is being enforced by nodes, I mean, there's a lot going on there. 51, but I mean, remember, 51% attack isn't really what you need. You only need 33%. That's the reality of it. 51% attack is kind of a sort of crude theoretical thing, but you can do just as much damage with 33% of the hash rate as you can with 51% attack. With the block withholding attack, I don't think I'm going to get into that right here because I haven't digested it fully enough to explain it without just falling over my words for about 45 minutes. So, but I have understood it conceptually and now can't explain it technically again. But you basically always keep one block in reserve. You're a block ahead all the time, and if ever anyone else mines a block, you invalidate their block because you have an extra block, behind, something like that, and that means other competing pools keep getting their blocks orphaned all the time, and they eventually go out of business. So the fact that can happen means that you only need 33% to dominate the mining ecosystem. You don't need over 50%. If you know what you're doing as an attacker, you only need a third. Rabbit hole is deep as fuck. Deep as fork? The rabbit hole is deep as fork. Bitcoin is just it's the gift that keeps on giving. It satisfies our curiosity forever. Sorry about all the coughing, guys. I'm a bit dehydrated. So yeah, where are we at with everything? I was going to take a quick look through some of what's going on, but maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe I can do a short stream for once. I do believe we're at war here. I have Luke Jr. saying some interesting things here, but Luke wants to make block sizes smaller again. He really wants to, but he doesn't want to unless there's consensus, and there isn't consensus, so it doesn't look like we'll be doing that. Lol. So I'm not really sure if there's some other topics that are jumping out to people. Is there anything else that I should go over that you think, even if you're already aware of it, just something that fascinates you about cryptography, about public key cryptography especially? Is there anything there that you want to talk about? Let me know in the next couple of minutes. Sad we got more viewers now than we had at any point in the stream, but I've found out recently that when I finish these streams and just put them on the channel, I get actually quite a lot of people watching them afterwards. So they are worth doing, even if I'm only talking to 7 or 8 of you. And I appreciate you all being here and asking questions and participating. And it's not the cough that carries you off, it's the coffin they carry you off in. Oh, pretty good. That's record. Not bad, man. Yeah. Well, anyway, I have a hotkey. Hold on, what is it? M, perhaps? 1, 2. Yeah, M is my shortcut now. I'm using open broadcast software at the moment to do my streaming, and I've had a bit of fun understanding the way it works. It's really good software, and it's open source. So back in the spirit of open source software, we love it because anyone could contribute to it, and it is the most robust software out there for sure. Carl Pilkington, yeah, he's a funny one. Anyway, guys, I think we should end it there. That was a great stream. I really enjoyed talking about these things. I find it fascinating. We've gone on about an hour and 10 minutes here, so that's probably a good place to end it. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and as always, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter, Grassfed Bitcoin, or this YouTube channel if you want me to make a video on something related, even if it requires some research. I have a guy that's asking me to do compiling Bitcoin Core in Windows, and oh my god, it's just been so annoying. I haven't done it yet because I hate using Microsoft Windows so much. Nothing else works the way Windows works, so it requires a lot of learning for me, and it's really annoying to do. Even the Bitcoin Core instructions say, oh, you want to compile Bitcoin Core in Windows, alright, install Linux on your Windows machine and do it from there, cross-compile it. So, I mean, no, I don't want to do that. I mean, Das Record, you were saying you were looking at some software, what was it, PowerShell? You said it was very good. I did download it. I haven't had a chance to really look at how it works yet. Some of the commands work in a pretty Linuxy way, but there was other stuff, like I couldn't get touch to work. I don't know how to make a basic text file from the command line in PowerShell. I did look at a cheat sheet for it. There wasn't anything that spoke to me like that. It seems to be for more low-level commands, I should say. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna commandlets. Okay, I'll check that out. All right, guys, I will see you soon. Thanks so much for tuning in, and yeah, let me know if there's anything you want me to make videos on.